Fintech is sort of shining star of India's digital revolution. I started off with my bachelor's in electrical engineering. Work out of India, sort of then go to US. Yesterday I saw that our GDP has grown to 8.4%. But actually we have the number one market share in the payout space, which is disbursing money out.
Okay.
Cashfree was the first one. Do you know how Kafka works underneath? Why is it resilient? India is on top of the GitHub accounts and growing significantly. Would like to see more open source software also coming out of India.
A student who wants to learn perspective, you have so much production level software which is actually open source today.
Customer connectedness has to be there. Otherwise, we are translators of English to Golang or English to Java. Right?
Hey, hi. Welcome to another episode of ScalerPod. Today we have with us Ram, who is CTO of Cashfree. So thanks, Ram, for coming to our podcast.
Thanks, Arnav. Great to see you, and great initiative that you've been continuing for a few years now.
Right. Thank you. So I'll start off with like the question that I ask everybody, because I get a lot of different answers based on what stage the company is, which is like, what typically does like a day at work for you look like? What kind of stuff are you doing these days? What's the work week also of a CTO of Cashfree right now?
Sure. Cashfree, we are in Fintech, and Fintech is sort of the shining star of India's digital revolution.
Yep.
And we do more digital transactions than the US, UK, Europe, the entire Europe. China also put together, we do orders of magnitude more than that, right? So I think the scale and it needs to be up all the time.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I start the day off is just making sure that everything has been up and it continues to be up.
Yeah.
So we take uptime sort of extremely seriously. And the second big metric that we use is the success metric, the success rate of the transactions.
Transaction success.
So as we can increase the success rate of the transactions, the business of our customers grows. So these two metrics is very, very close to our heart. So me and my directs, we start off the day looking at sort of those metrics and how they are, and how we can sort of move it up will be in the later part of the day. After that, I think there would be customer, if any sort of pipeline of customers coming in, there would be requests from our growth team to sort of what can we do to...
The customers, you mean like companies who are using a payment gateway?
Payment gateway, right. So either they are existing customers or someone who wants to onboard with Cashfree Payments, or they are using some of our products and want to use other products, right? So how do we sort of pitch solutions, entire fintech solutions to our customers as opposed to point products? So there would be some emails and requests on those things, and some of it could be on customer escalations, right? So though we pride ourselves at industry leading CSAT, there might be a few escalations here that we have to take care. So that comes as the next one, to make sure that we have the right person, right team working on that. And after that goes into how are we doing on our OKRs, right? Are we achieving our business metrics? Are we meeting or beating that? What do various teams need to do? Is there any blockers? How do we bring those folks to the common table to solve it?
Right.
And then I think it goes into more technical, sort of there'll be some design discussions going on, right? That we do have now I think we've grown enough with a lot of engineers now. So we do have a design review committee, architecture council thing. It helps. Everything doesn't need to go through, because we'll have to balance speed versus the review. The critical ones where something new is being developed, or they have a few very good options, but they're not exactly able to sort of finally make which is the best option to choose, or there are some security reviews that need to be done. A few things come into that. So sort of going through sort of those design proposals and options and all that. And then one-on-ones, very, very important. I think we are to sort of meet my directs as well as skip level on how they are doing at Cashfree, how they are also helping move the business forward. And after that, I think there'll be a lot of random discussions. We are very open thing. So we have open offices and people just drop by to have they have some thought, some question, some idea, some blocker, anything. So it's all open. People come and go. And I think maybe every day, maybe at least 10 to 20 such conversations would be happening. So I think, yeah, this would be my rough sort of day in the office at Cashfree.
Got it. How big is the team right now?
Engineering, we are about 300 folks, and product about product UX and all about 100. We're about 400.
Got it. And at this scale and stage, like how much time do you get to, probably review code or get into architecture reviews and all of that, or is that something you don't get time for much?
Architecture design, I get a lot of time and I make time for that. That is how I think all of us can stay sort of very close to it. And so many things are changing every day, right? There's like so many new things are coming. And for every problem, we have about at least 10, if not more, possible solutions, right? So rarely we don't have a solution, but I think we have a plethora of solutions and things. Now, if I don't get into that, then I think I'll become a little bit of a dinosaur thinking, and then I also won't have the right insights to give them or suggestions to do that. So I do get a lot into sort of architecture and design discussions, both through the council, or if not also, I think we've moved into more of a right first culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that enables sort of people like me to get into the details, right? So if we had, say, 20 or 30 such discussions happening only verbally, then it becomes, I think, impossible for anyone to be in that many things.
Too much context.
Too much context, and no one wants to keep repeating the same thing over and over again, right?
Correct.
So now we've moved towards that. When we write your thoughts down, it's much more crisper, and it helps everyone get that context. And I encourage all our folks, all our managers, all our directors, VPs, all of them do get into the detail. And because of the ability to sort of asynchronously read all the wonderful design docs that are being produced, we are able to get into that. We can actually read much faster than listening, right? Like, say I understand something, I know where is the
scrub through
the whole thing, get into where typically I might have made the mistake earlier somewhere in my job. So I know that typically might be happening. So we can just skim through certain things, go into areas. Quite a bit. I would say even maybe 20-30% of my time does go into architecture design discussions. Code review I've not done that much recently, but once in a while if we had an incident, then when we start looking at what can we do better, right? What went wrong in the PRs, at that time get into looking at the PRs and what could have been improved. We had one recently, and a lot of suggestions came to a really good RCA discussion that happened.
Nice. Sure. So I'll dive deeper into how you folks do RCAs and postmortems and incidents also, and then I'd be curious to know the landscape of Cashfree also, what all things you're doing. But before that, I would love to take a quick walk through your journey in tech so far as well. So right from the beginning of getting involved with tech, so how has the journey been?
I started off with my bachelor's in electrical engineering, and right after I put in my choice for electrical, and CS was my second. After sending it, I realized I should have put CS first. So nothing against electrical, just I think my nature I think is suited a little bit more towards the software engineering than the
I also opted for electrical, and then life took me.
So that's how I started. Then I realized I'll have to I think at that time there's not that much flexibility to change your discipline, but I do realize that now in some of the new education policy and all, people are able to take breaks, switch and all that. I think that's really, really great. Because I think 30-second switch, I sort of spent 4 years down there.
Right.
So then I switched to masters. I did in computer science, and then joined Oracle thing. This was in US at that time, and all my batch at that time, that was a default way to do, right. Do your bachelor's, go to US for a master's,
Right.
join a good software company there and thing. It's great, and I worked in Oracle. Started off with supply chain planning, and I didn't know anything about supply chain planning, but I had to write code for that. So one thing I did was went through a thing called CPIM certification. It gives you some 6 courses in all different inventory management, work in process, scheduling, MRP, etc. That gave a lot of context, right? Like, while I know how to write code, I did want to understand what am I writing for, how can I make it better, so get that sort of domain knowledge. After software, I think supply chain is one of my favorite things, and a lot of things that we do in software, like Agile or Kanban, and etc., comes from there, right? Like they really
modeling of the software delivery life cycle,
even quality processes, right? Like how they do it for cars and etc., right? So a lot of things have been sort of imported from there. So I think going to the source also gets us the context a little bit more. So after that, wanted to get into the database product, Oracle database product, and that time also, even now that's sort of the number one in database, right? The flagship database. So worked in a few teams there in database replication, clustering, materialized views, etc. Got to work with really, really bright colleagues whom I could learn a lot. And a lot of things that I do today is sort of learned from the Oracle days, how they develop software, how they build quality into it, right? We literally had a PhD in physics testing our database software, and he would pull the plug and make sure nothing gets corrupted, right? So like a lot of automated tests we have, but he would go to that extent of keeping the database running a load, and do the power switch off, and with that he would log 20-30 bugs, and then it would get fixed before it sort of goes out, right? So and then how they ran tens and thousands of tests was again a great learning opportunity that we are sort of replicating. We'll talk about that later. Then around 2008 I came back to India, and that time it was due to sort of family, being with the family and all of those reasons. But I think fast forward to 2024, I think more reasons to work out of India sort of than go to US. Yesterday I saw that our GDP has grown to 8.4% blockbuster quarter. Right now we are functioning like a company with blockbuster quarters for a country. So I think in great shape, a lot of startups. There's a book I think called Startup Nation, which talks about Israel's growth. I think we are now a big and sort of bright startup nation as well. So now I think so many opportunities for youngsters here. And so 2008 I came back, joined Yahoo, and that was my first foray into software as a service. So I was leading the Yahoo Stores team, which is helps the merchants create a storefront, all through SaaS, right? Great experience running 24/7 software as a service, right? So database, still we shipped the software, someone else was responsible for keeping it up and thing. So Yahoo taught me how to build resilient systems, always having the uptime, etc.
Right.
Then subsequently I sort of branched off into startups thing. And my journey, not maybe exactly charted out like that, started off with the biggest company that I've worked for, which is Oracle. And then it's becoming younger and younger companies. I'm becoming older and older. So worked in a couple of ad tech startups. And then now close to 3 years I work with Cashfree Payments. And this is my sort of fully Indian-based company, right? All of us marketing, sales, engineering, product, and it's great.
India for India.
It's a great experience to be sort of responsible for end-to-end life cycle of ideation to sales to support to everything. So yeah, that's been my journey, more than 2.5 decades, long time. But yeah, just seems just now I started in Oracle.
Right. So like with Cashfree, sort of jumping into fintech, and then I think they've been here for 3 years. Means like 3 years back, also like fintech was definitely booming, and really I think the number of payments, the number of wallets getting created, all of that like skyrocketing. So what was that experience like? I think you have worked with stuff like e-commerce, SaaS, and ad tech, and then what is it like to be in fintech?
Yeah, fintech is great. Like I think of it as a little double-edged sword. The impact that we can have is great. Right? Like you go into websites and you can actually make payments through the software that you made. Your relatives, friends are making payments, etc. So that part of satisfaction comes from having an impact. I think it's great, but the thing is, it has to be very high quality. We are dealing with money. So it can't go down. We can't sort of lose money, and also we know that there are sort of attacks also happening. So how do we protect our end customers from, say, fraudulent merchants, as well as the merchants from some of the fraudulent customers, right? So yeah, great opportunity, but the risks also have to be sort of managed, and that is also an opportunity. So actually, it's quite exciting and rewarding as well at the end.
Right. So I would like to start with obviously getting a lay down on like what all from a technology perspective, like what all does Cashfree do? And I'm sure like the viewers sometime or the other they would have bought something, and they would have seen a small Cashfree logo on the payment page, and then probably people, if at least the people who view this podcast, definitely they do understand what a payment gateway is. But nevertheless, like what does it mean to be a payment gateway? What all, from a tech perspective, what all are you building?
Yeah, so we have a full suite of products. One is the payment gateway,
Yeah,
and
that's the
that's
most
our
popular
largest
also, yeah.
popular thing. But actually, we have the number one market share in the payout space, which is disbursing money out. Like
Okay.
Cashfree was the first one to come out with that innovative product, and we still enjoy a significant majority of the market share there. That's our second largest in terms of GMV as well as NR. So that is for money going out for sort of various reasons, right? Like it could be rewards being sent, or the any awards for the games that they won. It could be your salary, etc., etc. Right. So that's the second one. The third suite of products that we have is for verification, right? So in the entire sort of fintech space, identity verification is super important.
Right.
And we have about 28 different IDs that can be used and verified. And the interesting thing is we sort of doubled it last month, right? We had about 14, and we've added another 14 last month. So we are sort of leader there as well in the identification space. And then we also launched a product called Flowwise. So this sits on top of the payment gateway, and it allows people, merchants, to optimize traffic going to different payment gateways.
Okay.
So if
Yeah,
they,
this I think
yeah,
any big e-com,
any big
they
e-com
usually
or
have a load balancer of
load balancer
payment
of
gateways
payment
in a
gateways.
sense. Yeah.
Correct. And we add other things also on top of that to do recon across your payment gateways, right?
Okay.
So get all your transactions from different gateways and do that. That's next product that we have. And we also started on the offline space, right? So we want our merchants to have their online, offline, all their transactions sort of flow through Cashfree.
Right.
And we have some big merchants as well using that. It's been launched recently and getting good traction, including some of the metros are using the offline payments from Cashfree.
Yeah. So I'll have a very basics 101 ELI 5 kind of question, and the reason I have it is because when I've even taught software engineering to people with some of my mentees, or people building some side projects and all as well. what really happens when like you go to a checkout page and you make a payment? What is it that the payment gateway is doing? A lot of times it is opaque simply because, I mean, not everybody has been fortunate enough to actually work at a payment gateway. And if you haven't, then that thing is typically very opaque. You just drop in an SDK, and somehow it's happening. You need to go and make an account on something like Cashfree, and the money will just come in. But obviously, there's a bunch of stuff involved, right? I mean, people can pay with a card or a UPI or something, and then it has to come from the customer's bank account to finally the merchant's bank account somewhere going through your systems. So what all things is a payment gateway really doing, in at least in terms of, let's say, a software engineer who understands that, okay, data going from one endpoint to another in those terms?
At the end, we just see the SDK and we want to make
Yeah.
that as simple as possible.
Yeah.
No code.
I mean, that's
no
a
code
good part of the
buffer.
product.
Correct.
That you don't need to understand
Need to
it,
understand
and you can just drop
that.
a JS SDK and you're done.
Right. So, but there are sort of several layers of players in this ecosystem, right? So, firstly, you come to the PG, it comes to us. And even there are some layers where it can go to the merchant server, and then the merchant server can initiate to us as the completely directly from the browser. Yeah. We allow that for some of the bigger merchants, right? So eventually it comes to Cashfree, and then as you said, there are multiple payment methods, right? There are cards, credit cards, debit cards, UPI, net banking, etc. Right? So there are one level below. They are also internally, we call them also PGs or payment gateways. There are slight difference between payment aggregators and payment gateways, and they interface with the banks. Right? If we say if it is net banking, then they sort of make the call to the bank. Then the thing is redirected to the bank side. You do all of your stuff and authenticate, and then it gets redirected to sort of the Cashfree page, right? And then that flow is thing. So similarly, if there's a card network involved, then the request goes to the card. There you have the multiple players there, right? The acquiring side. Then there's a full transaction that happens, right? A lot of validation happens on whether this particular transaction can go successfully. Do you have sufficient balance, etc. Right?
Card issuer, I think, can give you a probability whether it will succeed or not.
And all that. So all of that has to sort of succeed, and then the payment happens, etc. So similarly for UPI, there'll be NPCI at the end, but again, it has to go through some of the banks. So in each of the different mode, there'll be a totally different layer involved. And all of this has to be orchestrated, and it finishes within a second or sometimes a little bit more. Yeah. So many multiple calls happen, and finally the sort of payment is made. Now, the other additional things that we solve beyond this is because there are so many players down there, some of them may be having a downtime, right? They may be going through sort of maintenance and all. So Cashfree, what it does is dynamic routing. We figure out which sort of path, which PG to take, which acquirer to go to, etc.
Sometimes even among the options, it shows one of them grayed out that this has downtime right now. So like one of your cards might be disabled, or one of your UPI accounts might be disabled.
Correct. So all of that information also we keep gathering, right? So whenever we know that there is some downtime in one of our downstream players, we have something, we create an incident for that, and then we use that in a routing logic to where do we go to maximize the success of the particular transaction. There is also cost involved, right? All players don't offer the same cost for a particular transaction. So we optimize that also in the dynamic routing. So probability of success at the best cost is sort of chosen and sort of goes there. There are additional retries also that can happen, right? So certain time, as you said, sometimes we show it in the checkout page itself that this particular thing is having downtime. Do you want to choose an alternate one? But after you choose, if something happens, we still want the transaction to go through. So there we smartly, whenever we can, we would retry it, and the end customer doesn't even know that all of that is happening. Yeah. And we would bear that particular cost even if we did retry.
Or like those failed transaction
retries and all of that. So yeah, all of this is done, and the data science also involved, where we do try to predict. Sometimes there could be like sort of preventive maintenance happening on a particular scheduled flow, right? So proactively, even to minimize the few transactions from failing, we do use some data science to predict that and choose a better path at that particular time.
Predicting the failure, I mean, there could be multiple signals, right? I mean, whether that particular issuing authority is down, or maybe that particular any payments for that particular merchant is failing, or some those kind of things.
Right. Yeah, all of that. Yeah, historically we sort of gather that and run some algorithms on that to know that. But after that, we would be able to react also, right? Like even if we didn't predict, like if we know a certain bank does some down maintenance window at these particular times, right? Like preventively, we can go to other PGs.
Got it. And about the other product which you're talking about, which is like disbursing money. So, I mean, how is that different from like a consumer side payment gateway, and what all things are involved in that?
That's also sort of evolving space as we speak. So in that, right, the merchants have a wallet with us, and they can recharge that wallet, just like maybe a consumer wallet, but this is a merchant wallet, and they can pay out money to their end consumers, right?
Okay.
So
So
it
is
could
this
be
wallet like a bank account, or
it's in a bank account.
Oh, it's a bank account.
It's a bank account. A wallet is it's a virtual bank account. It's in our account, but now we do have another offering where it's a connected bank accounts, right? So we would be able to take money from their own sort of bank account and then pay to the recipient's bank account. So that's, I think that is also an evolving things from the RBI. So we are moving more and more towards the connected payouts. But we traditionally started off with the wallet-based payouts. So another thing that payout is used for is a product called Cashgram. So in case you bought anything on cash on demand, cash on delivery, and you wanted a refund, right? Typically the refund happens online, right? Even though you paid sort of by cash. So that is called a Cashgram. I think it was named after Telegram thing. Like you get cash thing, a link, you get a link, and then you can use any of your payment apps or UPI or anything to sort of receive money into the account of your choice for the refund. A lot of the e-com players use that for sort of automating and quickly doing refunds, right? So they can do refunds really, really quickly, and their customer experience also improves. They can do instant refunds as well.
Right. And I think for like this payout, I think it's would also be used for like the merchant themselves to get money for themselves. Like if there's somebody selling something, then
yeah. So yeah, it's they can get paid via the vendor payments. All of that also sort of goes through payouts.
Got it. Coming to another aspect, and you were talking about like when we were discussing whether you get time to get into architecture, and all, you were saying that to decide whether something goes through architecture council or not, I mean, you have to balance the speed of shipping things also, right? I'd love to ask a similar question in terms of security as well. Like, I mean, in a fintech setup, security obviously is of paramount importance, but it's obviously a market with a lot of competitors, and being able to bring out new features is something that keeps you ahead, I'm sure, right? What's your playbook of handling this kind of trade-offs as well, right? I mean, be secure, but also that should probably not stop your shipping velocity of features. So what do you do about it?
Yeah, so we learned a lot from Yahoo. There's a group called Paranoid. The name was that they are really paranoid about things going wrong and getting hacked.
Okay.
And at that time, that was sort of the best way to do security engineering.
Okay, right? Like a red team kind of concept.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we adopted that. So thanks to all the Yahoo folks who did that. Right. So we have a sort of a central paranoid team, and we call it a local paranoid. So Central Paranoid have security engineers who are dedicatedly working on that. But then some volunteers from different teams are called the local paranoids, and they meet once a week where they have a security stand-up, discuss latest changes that have come, what should they do. We also have an active bug bounty program where external ethical hackers can submit things. And then one of the things that we do track is that keeps going down, and the more we fix before it thing, right? Yeah, and that is working out well because it's not just a group of the central paranoids' responsibility to make things everything secure.
Do you have like a bug bounty for your paranoia team as well?
We have metrics for that, but we didn't go ahead with, we do the reward for the external one, but not for the internal one, because we thought that was a bit core to engineering to build secure products. We didn't want to, and the local paranoids, they are able to handle a lot of the sort of security code reviews. They come from both dev and QA. And that also speeds us up, right? Like, so if it was a central team, then they can become a blocker. But these guys are able to figure out the low-hanging fruit, making sure basic things are not broken.
To a degree, it's rewarding in itself to be able to break your system and find out the flaws in it. Yeah.
So, and some folks have found very, very interesting sort of security bugs before it was shipped. So we did fix it thing. And we've also invested in automation, right? So we have the entire DevSecOps thing. So there are checks happening on static code analysis. And then there are some automated penetration tests that happen in the sort of CI/CD pipeline. So a balance of reviews by humans, which may tend to be a bit slow, versus automated things, checks that happen, which becomes a safety net. We are able to sort of balance the agility with being secure as well.
Got it. It's interesting to know that your folks from your QA team are also part of the paranoia team, and that's good, I think, because a lot of times like developers are blinded by what you have built. You don't see other picture, which and I think in my experience, like working with some of the very experienced and very bright folks in QA, I've seen like they have that uncanny ability of sort of figuring out ways to break the system, which is definitely a great thing to have in a team like a paranoia team. So I would want to get a bit more idea about the testing landscape also. What's your testing? What does your testing team look like? Like, is it mostly people building tools to help test, or is it like there's also like there's certain flows you test manually as well? And what's your in general approach towards testing?
I think testing and quality is sort of super important. And we sort of make that conscious choice a few years back, right? I think initially we had a very, very few SDETs, and the developers used to sort of test it and ship it out. We made a conscious choice to sort of increase the SDETs. The primary reason is, as you said, they have a different mindset, right? Like if you go look at psychology, whatever I build, a normal person would feel good about what I have built, right? I would want to believe that it's the best one and it's the thing. So we need someone else saying that, no, I will break it. And I remember one of our head of quality at Oracle, we had released a thing called Unbreakable Linux. At that particular time, Oracle Linux was called Unbreakable Linux. So all of us got a penguin, the Linux penguin sticker with Unbreakable. So he was the only one who came, took the sticker, put it on his room, and he scratched out the and he said it's breakable Linux, right? So he was heading quality, and he said, I will break it. It'll be unbreakable when it ships out, but when it comes to QA, it's still breakable. So I like that sort of fighting spirit in that. They are also like hackers, right? Like security. Hackers find security bugs, and the SDETs find the thing. So we've invested in that. Having said that, the con of just going with the QA team being responsible for the QA actually slows us down, right? The developers might develop the products and then give it to the QA, and if fundamental things are not working, So now what we found is a balance, and we call it as a QA assistants. They own the quality, but dev has to be an equal part in making sure they build high quality products.
Right.
So different teams are in different phases of evolution. About 30 to 70% of automations are done by dev engineers, and the SDET, and hence they focus more on building frameworks to enable the dev to do it. And then they take care of more the corner cases thing, right? So they've done a few very good initiatives in automated performance tests, right? Like scale is sort of extremely important. Even a few milliseconds change in our thing would bring our SR down, right? So for the critical PG flows, etc., there's performance tests happening before that sort of software goes out. They take care of that. They've introduced something called fuzz testing, which can generate data, right? Corner case data, invalid data, huge data, etc., and then feed it into the APIs and see how that does. They've gotten into sort of chaos testing. How resilient are we? Kill systems and make sure we are still transactions go through. So the SDET focus, we can say, is ensuring quality with the support and the mindset of dev also shipping high quality for products, and all the non-functional requirements, right? So 70% of functional requirements is taken care of by dev, performance, security, even user experience, etc., right? So we want the SDETs to sort of grow into sort of that mode of making sure, is this product what would delight the customer, as opposed to just making sure a PRD, right, all the features are there, kind of a thing. That's been our sort of evolution. I think it's working out quite well for us.
Right. Uh, I do have a sort of follow-up question, because you mentioned scale, and I just thinking through that is, today your production systems are obviously running at a huge scale, right? You're doing what, hundreds of millions of transactions a day?
Yeah.
Right. So if you land, let's say, a new feature which introduces a whole new service to the flow. So, that feature might, let's say, on day one see like millions of users of traffic, right? Versus like if you launch a new startup and you're seeing like 100 users and 1,000 users, and obviously like you keep on coming to the bridges and when you need to cross them. But when something is already at scale and you want to add a service to it and you add a component to it, so what's the life cycle of, let's say, new services going into production? Like, how do you make sure that will be able to land at the existing scale that you have?
As you said, I think because of our current ecosystem of merchants, anything new that we launch, their adoption becomes high. So we do ask both our product managers, engineering managers to sort of predict what is the scale that they are going to give optimistically, and then be ready for at least 10x of that. Right. So if we didn't do that, and we would say, let us ship it and see, then if we ourselves are not confident of the adoption, then it may not be thing. So we say fully invest in that, and at least it should be 10x. And if there's more confidence that this is going to pick up, then I think like scaling up to 100x would be a good sort of benchmark that we do, right? As we speak, we are sort of going to migrate to a new RBAC system. And those are the numbers that the team is at the design phase itself. They sort of take the production-like data and they make sure that it would scale somewhere between 10x, it should definitely, and to 100x. They do the performance tests on simulated data. That's a good part of being in a SaaS software as opposed to shipping software. We have real data, and we have the real traffic flow also. So even the actual traffic flow goes into logs. We take that and then use that to run the performance tests on actual sort of data, but fuzzed out data from the production one, and then make sure. And this all happens before when it comes to the design review council. So they would do it with, say, a couple of options, and then measure all of that, and then sort of make a decision, but then run it by the DRC to make sure thing. So that is sort of helping us thing. And then our whole system is elastic, right? So that also we invested a lot to be able to auto scale on Kubernetes. So everything is on Docker and Kubernetes. So we don't have to sort of do that much of capacity planning. We do, like IPL is coming. I'm sure you know a lot more about it. And we are doing that thing as well, right? Preparing for IPL. Our base number of nodes might increase, but we can elastically and horizontally scale. So all our design, all our microservices have to be auto-scalable based on the custom metrics, either latency or CPU, etc. That also sort of gives us the additional cushion of handling more scale than maybe what we started off initially with.
Got it. So asking for a piece of advice, probably on behalf of those who might be just starting out scaling their systems into distributed setups, right? And I've heard from people who are moving into like going from a monolith into like a Kubernetes kind of setup, and then they have started hitting the sort of scales where you need to split out multiple layers. Every layer might scale differently, kind of things. How do we get as close as possible to actual production level testing? Because I mean, let's say testing out an individual service with a barrage of requests and seeing that okay, this service one single node can handle probably like, let's just say 1,000 requests per second, but that does not really mean that in your fully production level setup where that is one of the layers and there are a bunch of other layers. So if you make 10 of them, it does not mean necessarily that you are able to handle 10,000 requests per second, right? The fault lines could be somewhere else. In your general advice, like how would you suggest to be able to test as close as possible to a production scenarios?
Yeah, first thing, as I said, was maybe start off with the production scale of data, right? But that is possible only when you're migrating something, as I was saying.
I mean, you would at least have 1% of production data. You can probably multiply by 100 and generate that. But if you've never seen that data,
yeah. So there, I think we have to be somewhat accurate in sort of predicting the throughput and the latency that we are going to sort of see. And we should be able to generate data very, very close to the production data, right? Like, so generate that seed data. If you're going to have, say, 1 billion rows in the table, sort of invest in a tool that would do that,
right.
Put it into the database, and then start off with a single thing. Right? There's an interesting thing, that throughput and latency, they are sort of a little bit independent, though it might look like they are dependent.
Yeah.
But even with one particular transaction, my latency can be 300 milliseconds. So just make sure that we can optimize that down, right? We say you have infinite resources. Like it's an example of a water flowing through a pipe, right? The length of the pipe is how long the time it would take, and that's the latency. And the size of the pipe is the throughput, right? How much water can sort of go through. So make sure that the latency can be tuned in sort of isolation to make sure that is optimal, right? Like rather than flooding it with, say, thousands of requests and then grappling with both throughput and latency, make sure that this is done. So there, if you see that the things needs to be cached, etc., that can be taken care of, right? Like assuming infinite resources, am I doing well enough?
Right.
Once that problem is solved, now add that next complexity of doing it with throughput. So then that's the next, maybe the experiment that can be done and then tuned, right? Am I scaling fast enough? Right? Where are the bottlenecks there? Is the network the bottleneck there? Is the disk the bottleneck there, etc., right? So that is the next step. After that, maybe bring it into the production-like QA system.
Right.
Where, say, because Kubernetes, we have only one Kubernetes cluster, right? Like it'll have hundreds of nodes, but all our systems are running there. So in QA, simulate it with other performance tests happening on your major product, and then add your new product as well, and then test it. Maybe I think this three sort of step, first latency, then throughput, assuming infinite resources, independently make sure everything is done. Then take it on a test drive in close to sort of production. And then after that, now we do have sort of graceful onboarding, right? We can sort of, okay, in our case with the B2B thing, the merchants are onboarded into the product. So we do make sure that we do have some checks there, that we onboard the merchants onto the product in a sort of graded manner. These things would help. The B2C might be maybe slightly different there, that how do I do for a new product.
Yeah, that you can't have
but there also
SOPs
I think
or checklists there. You will have to productify the whole thing.
Correct. But one thing that maybe could be done is the don't launch that feature for everyone.
Like feature flags.
Very feature flags and things. Very similar to onboarding merchants slowly. Onboard the end customers also slowly into the thing.
I mean, you can't manually control, but you can automate it. Still, you can control the number of people getting into it. Makes sense. And the next step, which is like, I mean, what do you do to prepare for something going to production? Once it does, like, what's your typically set of, I would say, rituals and playbooks do you have for monitoring and responding to incidents? What does it look like to be on call at Cashfree, or when things go down, then what is it that happens in the war room maybe?
We've invested a lot in observability across all the services. Even for a new service, it has to have observability when it sort of goes out, and it's from logs to traces across, because we are also on multiple microservices. So how do I trace a request from the ALB down to the pod on sort of Kubernetes? We've invested in that as well. And we use a lot of open source stack in the observability. It goes into a Prometheus cluster. All the metrics also go into that. And then we use the alert manager to send out alerts. And that goes in, and then there it gets split. Is it an alert, like something that I should look at, or already is it at an incident scale? And if it's an incident scale, it goes to an on-call, a phone call goes 24/7. So it's in interest of the on-call person to ship really good software, and the manager, etc. So you don't want too many calls happening. And it escalates up to me. So it doesn't go to a CEO at this point, but it does escalate up to me if it's not sort of resolved within time, or it's not acknowledged. Yeah. So that someone, if needed, someone else can be brought in to do that. And there is a ritual that we sort of follow, right? We've automated those things also. New Slack channel would be created for every particular incident and posted on a priority channel. And then people who are either the salespeople who need to maybe sometimes inform the merchants, customer care, product manager, engine, all of them go into that particular channel. And then get onto a Zoom call as needed. And also we publish if there's a downtime, we've built webhooks into merchants that we sort of tell them that they can react as they sort of deem fit. And then when things are restored also, we tell them. So I think end to end from that incident, merchants also get visibility into what is going on and when it's recovered thing. So this whole pipeline is set up. But our goal is to not exercise it often thing. And we've steadily been bringing down all the incidents that happen. And some of the RCAs came up with, we need to do canary deployment. So we do that as well. We use Argo CD, and that minimizes a very, very, very less traffic goes through to the particular new release. And that also is hooked into the observability stack. So if anything goes
green on canary, then you go to the next.
Then go into the next one, right? So if there's anything, there's an immediate automated rollback that's done within a few minutes. It's all back to sort of normal, and just for that few transactions.
Got it. And in terms of I'd say. Because you're processing payments data, so in terms of what your product promises as well as the regulatory reasons, there are definitely going to be a lot of security compliance that you need to follow. I'd want to know that, specifically in a fintech setup compared to something else, does that pose extra challenges for you when you're developing things?
I think regulatory things have been a little bit in the news recently, and we also now we've got a PAPG license in January, and we were one of the first 4 to get it from RBI, and that's a great achievement for the team. My personal thing is we do need someone sort of setting the standards, right?
Fair enough, yeah.
There are something arguments about, right, should we unleash creative minds without any regulatory thing? But we have seen that sometimes it can go astray, right? We don't know whether creative minds can actually have very creative ways of going astray. So we welcome regulatory aspects, and because this is the potential for downside is huge, right? Like say being in the fintech, right?
Well,
they do
people's
have
money can be lost.
money can be lost. There can be money laundering happening, and it can not just software risk, that there could be potential risk to the country as well, right? India is one of the most attacked in terms of software attacks. We are sort of leading, and it's only going to grow as our GDP grows. We can expect the software attacks also to grow. So there has to be sort of controls in place, someone sort of validating things. So we welcome that. And once we welcome that, things are actually different, right? Like when we sort of resist it, then it goes down, think, oh, I have to do it because for the audit, and then we do something just for the audit, and that never works. We take it to take it to the next level, that if I can do regulatory things and really use tech, we have a team working on building technology for all our internal teams, and as part of that, even compliance comes in, right? So what should not be done manually and will be costly to do manually and slow to do manually, we've invested tech to sort of automate all of those things, right? Like we talked about the ID verification, KYC, we use those products internally as well. We also do sort of a merchant website scanning periodically, right? To make sure that they are not selling things that they are not authorized to sell, or are they getting a API key from us to do one type of business and then do some other type of business, right? So we invest in tech because we have hundreds of thousands of merchants, so impossible to do any of these regulatory stuff manually. We invest in that. The next step of thing, maybe the growth is one, accepting, then building tech to do it. Then can you sell it to customers, right? So then from cost it becomes profit, right? So all the ID verifications we sell. And then a lot of other fintechs and other businesses also have this onboarding problem, right? They might have their own sort of different regulation thing, right? So even maybe for a hospital, a patient onboarding, we'll have a bunch of steps, right? So we are helping them make that whole journey for different things. Or you have an NBFC, or you have some stock trading apps. They also have a lot of regulatory things. Now, I would take the example of AWS would not have been built to create AWS, but it was built to power Amazon. But now they're making billions of dollars out of that, right? So the regulatory tech that we build internally, we sell that also, and then that enables the ecosystem, as well as it's no longer a cost, but we can actually make a profit out of that. So that's how we see regulatory thing as an opportunity rather than a bane for us.
Yeah. So I was one of our most recent guests, there was Jyoti from Angel Broking, and he was talking about something interesting along those lines, that they had created a lot of the core set of tools which directly interacts with the exchanges like NSE, BSE. And since they were the first ones to sort of build the core setup, and those APIs are not like typically your HTTP with a REST API kind of things, though are lower level protocols. But since they built it and they wrapped it around and made REST APIs for themselves, then they went out and sold it to other brokerage platforms, and then that has turned into a profit center from a cost center. That's a very I would say pragmatic way of putting it, because you have to solve the compliance tech for yourself, but then others also have to solve it. So.
And risk is also right. What is the security part? What is the risk assessment? And we are now sort of building risk products, both on transaction monitoring, merchant monitoring, as well as even the payout monitoring, right? What is the risk of this particular money sort of going out? Is it a sort of a new merchant, etc.? We can sort of detect that and set thresholds, right? Too frequent payouts. What is the bar for how much money is going out, etc. So risk plus verification is a very much needed product as well.
Yeah. Makes sense. So I'll do a segue from here to a little bit about the growth of the engineers in your team and their learning. And the reason I just thought about that is also because all of these aspects, like, you um, when you're launching things, you have to take care of the scale, you have to, the security is there, the compliance is there. New folks who come into the team, what's the setup generally to be able to learn all of these things? Do you have like internal documentation, or do you have like any internal programs where you help people with all of these things?
Yeah, so I think documentation is always a tricky topic for engineers, but we made good progress there. All our design docs are in sort of pretty good shape. We do sort of set the bar both for engineers coming in and also engineers moving between teams, right? Someone who's been with us, say, for 3 years, they've really grasped the domain and they know in and out of their particular product. Now they're thinking what next thing, right? So we don't want them to think outside Cashfree, but why not move to another product, learn that one. And actually, Cashfree, if you can think of it as multiple companies within a single company, right? There are companies doing only PG, there are companies doing only dispersal, there are companies doing only verification suite, etc. So you can think of moving to other teams as well. So that's a problem is very similar. Someone new coming in and someone changing teams. How do they get context very, very quickly? So one part is documentation, which we are working on and addressing. The other part is even setting up that dev environment.
Yeah.
So that itself takes few days, 10 people maybe telling, oh, this database and this data, get it from there, put it there, and then now we have a few microservices to bring them up, and this has to be up, etc. That takes time. So to do that, we've invested in a dev environment thing, which sort of mocks some of the services, as well as you can have your own sort of virtual cluster on a centralized Kubernetes cluster.
Got it.
With a single command, you can bring up a verification suite environment. That speeds up.
I remember reading about a Lyft's engineering blog where they talked about how they had invested a lot into enabling local development setups. Anybody working on any particular service should be able to have the tools required to be able to run at that service independently on their local host, so that they are. I mean, because if you say that even to boot up your service you need to connect to the company intranet or something, you will cut down on productivity for people if you do that. But if you have this, either mocks, or you have just like maybe a developer version of a Docker Compose file which just puts up fake services around your main service so that you can do that. And that's very important. I also feel, because I've seen, when onboarding, especially with engineers who are, probably coming in with more of, with deep systems engineering experience but not distributed systems experience, and this thing can be too overwhelming for them to get started. For even one month they will take, and you'll think that like when we were interviewing this guy who was so sharp, and now a month has passed and there's no productivity. That's because you have created too many walls around them.
But one choice that we did was we still need the network. That's a conscious choice, because it is running on another Kubernetes cluster. You get a virtual cluster within that. But we could do it on a Minikube also on the laptop, right? For us, one of the reasons we chose that, we do have hundreds of services, and even for particular one product, you had to run maybe a few of them. And at that time, the laptop, even the MacBook Pro, became a little bit slow with the DB, etc. Otherwise, I think I would agree. Like, say, if I'm a Spark open source developer, right, I just download the fork the repo, and then can start coding on my laptop. That's the ideal thing. But in our case, in our context, we've gone with the network connectivity and
fair enough. Expecting network connectivity to be there.
Today's day. But if I want to work out of Rishikesh or Haridwar without network connectivity, they can actually run a Minikube, and this whole thing would be running on their laptop.
Right. Continuing from there, probably like answering maybe in context of engineers in your team, but also in general, like these days most software as it grows big, it starts looking exactly like this. There are a lot of services which talk to each other. There is millions of requests of scale coming in. Even if you are like a B2B company, like your product is still on someone else's edge, so you still, there's millions of requests coming in. Typically, to be able to actually contribute meaningfully, to add something new to this software, you have to understand all of these things that we're discussing about, that things you shape need to have scene scale. You have to understand about latencies of each component, and all of these things. As software engineers who are at like a basic employable level, where they start out in the industry, where okay, I know what a REST API is, and I know I can do a CRUD query on a DB, and maybe I can make a to-do list app and a backend and a front end for that. That's like the level where we say that okay, somebody is capable as a software engineer, can be hired as an SD1 or something. The journey where they can really meaningfully contribute net positive thing to these complex systems. What would be your general advice to people, to what should be the things we should look out for? What kind of things should we focus during learning to help make this journey faster?
I think today the opportunities are so much, right? Like the earlier, the only way we could learn was from our school or from college or from some books, right? So now we have these MOOCs, massively open online courses, and one can learn from anywhere, right? From SCALER, from the IITs, the MITs of the world.
NPTEL kind of courses are there.
There are so many, again,
OpenCourseware, MIT.
So I think that doing sort of more of those courses, right? Maybe we didn't have the opportunity maybe earlier in the career, but I think knowing that, and it does help to know about some of the fundamental courses also. Maybe we didn't do it in college, but like maybe how is a compiler built, etc. Even if I'm not going to go build a compiler, it gives that confidence that I can understand how complex things work. And then whatever we have to build, even if it's complex, that confidence I think will help us sail through. So doing some of the hard, perceivably hard courses is one sort of suggestion thing. Go beyond only the sort of CRUD APIs thing, and understand how the underlying thing works, right? One of the things that we ask in the interviews, okay, you have used Kafka. Do you know how Kafka works underneath, right? Like why does it scale? Why is it resilient? How does Zookeeper work, etc. Right? I think going behind the scenes, and even that information is available. Like typically, all of these things are open source, and a lot of documentation is available.
So I think also companies have their engineering blogs, and then they write about these things.
Right. I think going through those things, and another thing could be, although maybe I haven't done that. That's one of my maybe regrets, is to contribute to open source. I heard recently, I think Satya Nadella saying that India is on top of the GitHub accounts and growing significantly. Would like to see more open source software also coming out of India and contributing to that, right? And that's, I think, a great way to learn how to write great software. I think the best of minds all over the world are building these open source things.
I think in terms of so I've been a very active and passionate open source contributor in my college times. One of the things I feel that these days, what's so much better is that the most popular SaaS model today is you make your core offering open source, and then your SDK is open source, and then a managed service is paid. Now, I mean, not getting into like whether this model is good or not from a business perspective, but from a student who wants to learn perspective, you have so much production level software which is actually open source today. So I mean, something like Grafana, Prometheus, or Docker itself, or Kubernetes, you can contribute to these things, and these are used by literally every company. So that's a great thing, because I mean, back in the day there was a time when open source means you could contribute to the Linux kernel or VLC or Firefox and a handful of such software. And actual infra software that companies are using, that's not something commonly open source, so you cannot jump in and contribute. But today you can do that.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Or even say Spring Boot or React or
yeah,
anything that we are using. And if you need a bug fix now, then you're not blocked on anyone, right? You can make the PR and
yeah,
thing, right?
yeah.
And I think it improves the quality of it, right? The committers give you sort of great feedback
Yeah.
thing, and that helps your internal work as well. Right?
Right. So I think the feedback there is also, I mean, when you do it for the first time, a bit brutal as well. But my experience was that that versus when I first time like started my startup, and then how I would even review somebody else's code, was that you have a deadline to sort of ship something, and then you are a bit lax with the barriers you put, and then the standards you want to put things to. But the open source is not like that. I mean, the maintainers don't have a deadline to ship a certain feature, so they really want it perfect, and then they'll push you till your contribution is like 100% up to that standard, whether it's like as simple as the linting and the formatting, or whether sometimes there are these open source repositories where you can only contribute code if the coverage increases by your contribution. If it goes down, you can't contribute. It has to stay same or has to increase. So if you add code automatically, it means you'll have to add tests as well because otherwise the denominator will increase. And so I think
And even the branching strategy, right? In
the
some of
branching
them,
strategy, and
it has to
they'll be
a
very
linear,
pedantic about it.
right,
And
right.
but I think that that's a place where there is that opportunity to be pedantic about all of these things, and it can drill those things down in your head, which maybe in a fast-paced work environment, not necessarily you might get the opportunity to
And
do it so strictly.
And Linus Torvald talks in a video about even commenting what he prefers, single line comment or a multi-line comment.
Yeah.
In Linux kernel, he still prefers only one way of commenting.
Yeah. So I have contributed to the Linux kernel at a very early stage when I started coding, and then one of the things that has happened is Linux kernel commits, you have to write that signed off by line, reviewed by line. If somebody else has reviewed, then that ends up being a change. Then the reviewed by line also gets added, and you have that -r and -s flags in git commit when you do that, right? So now that's become part of my muscle memory. So when I do like git commit, I like git commit -s. And so when I teach classes, sometimes people are like, why do you do that -s? And I'm like, oh, that's for signed off. And people are like, what is the need of it? I'm like, in this project, you don't need it. But the thing is, like, it's my muscle memory because I have contributed to projects where you're not allowed to push code unless you do the signed off by line. But it is great because I have seen software where there are like literally wholesale cherry picks happening, copyleft kind of models where with Android, what happens is they develop from version, let's say 13 to 14, they will develop it in-house, and then they will dump it all on public when 14 comes out. So it's like, it's a copyleft model, they generally call it. Like, it's developed in-house, open sourced at every major version. So what happens is, like, if somebody had a fork at Android 13, so they will have to do a wholesale cherry pick of some 5,000 commits when Android 14 comes out. And in those committed by and signed off by, those lines are very important because otherwise you lose the typical history. But yeah, I mean, when you have to someday do a cherry pick of 1,000 commits in order, then you realize, okay, that thing really helps.
And having one sort of comment for each major check-in.
Yeah.
Otherwise, just 5,000 will become 50,000.
Right.
All the commits going in.
Right. I think like a lot of times when people just start off with software engineering and sometimes there's this attitude that I've written the code and it's working. Like, why is somebody being so pedantic about my commits name and my formatting? It just works. Why am I not allowed to merge it?
Because there's one person who didn't write the code who's going to be fixing it later, right? So
yeah. Correct. And what about at work? What is it that people should be looking to do or focusing on? I mean, about the learning and the open source, got that. But at work also, is there something you have an advice for people?
Yeah, I think engineers should be, see, they are the ones at the end building the product, right? Like engineering leadership, product managers, and all. We set how what everything is important, but they are the ones sort of building it, and they shouldn't just be building it, right? So they should know who am I building it for, what am I building, will my thing be better than the thing, right? So I think that customer connectedness has to be there, right? So internally I do tell people that otherwise we are translators of English to Golang or English to Java, right? And
And slowly ChatGPT is
we are a
starting to do that,
breathing
right?
version of ChatGPT
Yeah.
thing, right? So we need to be more than a breathing version of that. Yeah, so for that we do help engineers get on to sort of on calls with the customer, right? If there's a customer issue, support engineer, and then the on call also joins to get a flare of what is the issue that they are facing. And engineering managers and all, we do QBRs and thing to hear directly from the customer. So these are, I think, great opportunities in startups. When I started off, right, in Oracle, there are maybe so many layers of customer support, and even you may not even get a customer issue because there are other teams fixing it. So, but here you hear the good, bad, and the sort of ugly. The good thing also, right? Some merchants are sort of wowed by some of the new things that we've done, and when they hear that, that spurs them more. I think being connected to that, not losing any opportunity to see that, and then from there innovation sort of starts, right? Many times we might think that innovation is only the next light bulb is the innovation, and I can't make a light bulb, then I'm not innovating, right? So one of the things is keep always a list of things, pain points that we perceive. For example, right, a few things that I was noticed while using Cashfree. Next day I come in, I tell, and it's fixed by the in a few hours or by the end of the day, right? Yeah, keep a list of things to do, and then that creates innovation. And similarly, I think even in engineering, there would be things that are maybe not completely automated, right? Maybe there are scripts that can be written. We talked about how do I test a new service, right? We talked about a few things, but if someone can sort of put that whole thing together, there are some companies now doing just taking production data and then masking it and giving you a thing. There are some startups doing that as well. These engineers could innovate internally as well, go beyond just the functional part and make that work. And we create opportunities also for that, right? So we do form some virtual teams. So for example, this Argo CD thing was a huge project which went on for months. There were engineers from different teams who did this in addition to what they were sort of doing. They defined a new branching strategy. They defined how these pipelines have to be done, what the environments and all that. They learned a lot. I think, yeah, keep yourself open. And similarly, I think go beyond. If I'm a backend engineer, don't label yourself as a backend engineer, right? You need to do some front end, and that front end engineer is on vacation. Great opportunity to maybe step in and do that. A few years back, there was something, and we had to release something, and at that time I was coding on and off. I didn't know Angular, so got the front end engineer. He taught me Angular, and both of us started coding. At the end, I learned Angular, and he also said he learned a few things on how he can do even his Angular code sort of better. Be open to those opportunities, and I think even Docker came out of infra engineers, right, who felt the pain, and then they built that tool, and now it's sort of helping sort of the whole world ship software faster and all of that.
Right.
I think, yeah, that is, I think, is growing from a developer into an engineer, right? Constantly looking for opportunities and then finding sort of solutions. And then the resume also looks pretty impressive rather than saying that I designed, developed software or REST APIs, right? Now you can talk about what problems I solved, what scale I solved, etc. So
Nice. So it's I think really good, well-rounded advice, and then thanks for that. I have 2 or 3 forward-looking questions to sort of wrap. One of them is about what do you what are you looking forward to in the fintech space itself, and from technology perspective, what are things that excite you or you're very optimistic about? And I have a few questions more about like the general macro environment and then where tech is going. But I'll probably start with this, which is right now, sitting from your vantage point at Cashfree, which is one of the largest payment processors. So all of the, like, let's say the B2C payment space or the B2B space, what are some of the new things coming up which excites you a lot?
Being the number one in fintech in the world, it puts us in a vantage position. I think UPI is going to sort of several countries.
Yeah.
And our goal is also, right, make in India, make for the world. Our CEO has set an sort of ambitious goal of taking our fintech products to at least 15 countries in the coming years.
Right.
So that's a huge goal of serving so many different countries. Different challenges would be there, but that would be an opportunity to do that. And from an engineering angle, right, there will be some functional things that we have to do that. But that challenge also comes as to how do I roll out software to sort of so many countries, right?
Right.
Again, doing it like separately or manually is not going to sort of work out. How do we prepare ourselves for that? And maybe certain countries, they may not be the sort of the cloud things that we rely on in India. So how do we sort of do that on different clouds, or even maybe on-prem is an option right now? How do I design architect software to be able to do some of the
components could be on-prem,
etc. Right? It could be regulatory things also there, right? So those would be some of the engineering challenges that comes from going abroad. Of course, on-call support, all those challenges also will be there now, right? Even more 24/7 thing. And then other things also coming up, right? Like account aggregator framework has come up. ONDC has come up, and we saw, I think, Uber is signing up for ONDC. So I think what the success of UPI, I think, is going to be replicated in these other areas as well, like ONDC or even account aggregator. How does it help make the lending part even more fair and equitable to every corner of India? And at the end of it, there's a finance or a fintech aspect to anything, right? Even in ONDC, there will be a fintech aspect of the payments.
Money is changing hands.
Money changing, right? Economy,
happening.
Money has to happen. So fintech will be there. It will be like the operating system for all these sort of new changes coming in. And that, I think, keeps us excited that more and more problems are going to be coming up, and we'll be able to serve customers by building newer and newer products in those areas.
Got it. The other question, which is like, given the current set of conversations, have to ask is like, these generative AI and transformer models quite taken the tech world by storm, and I think quite a bit of good use cases also dropping out from, like, writing, auto-generating FAQs, customer service chatbots. I think there's been some of the biggest use cases, but other things, I think, giving a better layer on search, like what I think some Perplexity and then ChatGPT itself, those kind of things are doing, like answers rather than links kind of thing. But that's more in terms of like the consumer impact of it. But I'd say specifically in again, from your vantage point, I think I'd ask from two things. One is, do you see like this current wave of AI having like big implications in fintech itself right now? And the second thing would be like, in terms of developer productivity, like things like GitHub Copilot and all of these things, are you seeing benefit if you have tried it out, or is your team starting to use those kind of things?
So we do have a few things use cases that you said. Some of our customer response things are now powered by LLM models. And we've seen good adoption. Initially, we started off by suggesting to the care agent, they'll check, and then sort of they'll use it. Based on the feedback, I think it's getting up there. So from minutes now, we can do it in seconds. So that is sort of great. The other areas, Copilot, we did do a few of those things. The developer things, again, some of them, they feel that it's not that great.
Right.
It gives a lot of boilerplate code
Yeah.
and becomes unmanageable after some time. But some folks are adopting it, so we are letting whoever wants to adopt it, and then we'll see how that goes. We've not completely gone ahead with that, but whoever wants it, we are supporting them to do that. We have the test cases. The team has come back and said that it does a pretty good job of generating
a lot of tests,
90% of the test cases, right? So we talked about the SDET thing.
Yeah, I'm hearing this from a lot of people actually,
people,
that test case generation is something people are investing a lot.
People are investing a lot, and it's doing that repetitive work really, really well.
Yeah.
And then that 10%.
So when you probably create the boilerplate for one test suite, and then you just need to generate for a lot of cases, I think it's really helpful.
So I think these are the things, but I think we could do more on even sort of as we scale our sales and all, right? How do we empower them?
Correct.
We get the website of the potential merchant, and then we create a tailored sort of pitch deck for them with all our offerings, with all the other information that we know that if their competitor is on our system or right, like it can be sort of very, very fast and help them go pitch faster, better.
Also,
and they
like
can
which
do
of
more.
your products you want to pitch in which order, I mean,
which order.
depending on their needs, right? Yeah. Makes sense. And one final question, which is more again coming back to probably career advice to everybody in tech. Obviously, the general theme of the last year or so has been like recently Mark Zuckerberg was talking about like 2 sets of layoffs, and why that happened was because initially companies overestimated like the changes that pandemic might bring, and secondly, I think when the companies corrected that, they also realized that okay, we can really refocus back on productivity and then think of how we're doing things. And I think that's been a trend across the industry, and people are looking at what's an efficient way of running a business, and thus what's an efficient way of running engineering teams as well. In that environment, like again for folks who are in this industry, like what are things you would advise people to learn or look out for?
Yeah, last few months, maybe a year or so, I think we have seen that happen, and it has happened earlier. I've been maybe through 3 such cycles. 2000 internet bust, and then 2008, and I think it comes around a decade. I think this time it took maybe a little bit more, 15 years, 14 years, I think. So that, I think, cycle to some extent happened, just like I think a stock market cycle and all. So if we are, I think, prepared, and most of all the folks, right, whom I know, right, even though that they may have maybe been laid off in a particular company, if they had the real jobs, I think it's a matter of time that they get a different opportunity, and it could even be better. So I think rather than thinking about that, I think just doing what needs to be done, learning really complex things to do, then you're sort of always ready in your new job, right? If you take the example of NBA, a player might get traded from one thing, but he ends up being in another champion team.
Correct.
So I think having that positive attitude that I know my stuff and I can add value wherever I go gives that confidence thing. Right. The other thing, maybe on the soft same thing, right? Like having other interests or hobbies, I think might help even in the event that there is an event, layoff event happening, where we don't put all eggs in that particular job basket alone.
Right.
Again, that gives you sort of mental peace that even if it takes a week or so, right? Maybe if you like trekking or hiking, go on that particular trip. If you like music, maybe play a little bit more, catch up on learning a few more songs. That is more how do I react if in case that happens. First is being prepared. But even if I'm prepared, still we are humans, right? So at that time, having some of these things helps them get over that very, very peacefully, and then the next job would come sooner than later, and then it's back to normal after that.
Makes sense. Cool. Thanks for that last piece of advice. I think it's definitely valuable. And overall, I think thanks for all of tidbits of engineering culture from Cashfree that you've shared, and all of the learning advice for engineers as well. So once again, thank you so much for sharing all of this and coming here.
Sure. Thanks, Arnav. Great talking to you. Great knowing you as well. What is the journey that sort of you've taken? You're dabbling with open source, you solving some of the scale problems, etc. So thanks for having me. Great talking to you, Arnav.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks.